Most of college football nation's been trying to figure out who the best team in the nation is the entire season. Well, if you were watching from Athens on Saturday night, you may have had your mind changed or maybe your mind confirmed. I don't know. That was pretty impressive. We got Anthony Dasher on the line from UGAsports.com on Rivals to break down the Dogs. Anthony, good to have you here as always. I got to say, it went from looking like it might be a shootout, touchdown for touchdown, back and forth, 50 to 48 kind of deal, to just a beatdown in which Georgia gave up those 2 touchdowns in the first 3 drives. And then after that, wow, this did look like the best team in the country.
It did on this particular day, no question, about that. I mean, Georgia, like you said, it was 14-14, and that's kind of when Georgia just kind of put its foot down, which they've done now. In all these games that Georgia's played, where people have gone in thinking, oh well, maybe the Dogs be challenged here. It winds up being not the case. And Missouri did a pretty good job of it, the week before. But even that game there wound up. I think it would have been a bigger score that Georgia not had to settle field goals, like they did. So yeah, Georgia's sitting in a very good spot now. Tough road game coming up this weekend in Knoxville, but Georgia definitely, they obviously changed the minds of the playoff committee, which put them back at number 1 ahead of Ohio State.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. I think it can be argued, of course, resume, but that's exactly the move that I made this week, and it had nothing to do with Ohio State. They were dominant against a bad team. Georgia was dominant against a good team, and it was enough to turn my mind and make that resume adjustment. Ohio State at number 2, Georgia now at number 1, and of course an SEC championship game against Alabama, you would think would cement number 1, you would think. So I'm going to start with the offensive line in the ground game, 300 yards rushing, 8+ yards per carry. When you churn out those kind of numbers, that's just against anybody. That's impressive.
Yeah, that was a very impressive job by the offensive front. Like I mentioned off camera, Georgia getting Amarius Mims back was huge. His first action since the South Carolina game, came in and played extremely well, and it was kind of weird. You don't usually see offensive lines rotate as much in game as Georgia was doing. It's almost like on defense, you see different cornerbacks come in, or on offense, you see receivers flow in and out. Georgia's basically doing the same thing with the offensive line from like the second quarter really on throughout the rest of the game, and all that does is keep those guys fresh, and the running backs. I mean, Kendall Milton, that was the best he's looked in a long time. He's been banged up, for a lot of the year, but 9 carries, 127 yards. You'll put him with Dejon Edwards, who had another solid game. Georgia's run game, when they're running the ball like that, they're going to be very difficult to beat, because that just sets everything up with the passing game whenever they were to ground it out like they did in that contest.
Carson Beck, right after the game, was walking off the field doing an interview with Holly Rowe on ESPN, and she made the comment, doesn't even look like you played. Your uniform's completely clean.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't think, and this is serious, I don't think Ole Miss got a single hand on him the entire ball game. Not sacked. He wasn't touched by a single, Ole Miss defensive player, and that's, you can keep a quarterback upright like that and let him pretty much, pick his throws and give him time to make plays. You're not going to have a very good day if you're a defense, and that's certainly what happened to Ole Miss in this one.
And we have to talk about the impact of Brock Bowers, because even if it's not on the stat sheet, the defense has to know where he is and draw some attention to him, and it just opens other things up.
Yeah, no doubt. And people, going into the game, well, nobody was really sure how much Brock was going to play. I think I told you last week, it looked like he may see some action, but I don't think anybody figured that he would have 40+ reps in this one, and really looked like the same Brock Bowers that we're used to seeing. Had that touchdown catch there in the late in the second half, where for some reason they Ole Miss decided they were going to try to play him one-on-one with a linebacker, and that was pretty much a mismatch, an easy score for Georgia. So having him back right now, Ladd McConkey is now healthy. They got a lot of pieces. Like I said, a lot of the offensive pieces are back right now, and then we're seeing this offense really kind of take the next step.
And Anthony, still some injuries to deal with on defense,
Hmm.
especially in the secondary. But the defense, after a rough start, giving up a couple 75-yard drives,
Hmm.
they kicked it into gear. I know that the comparison would be 21 and 22, but that's a bit unrealistic. They're a fine defense in their own right.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's kind of unfair, I think, to compare, this defense to 21 and 22, especially to 21 defense, which is really a generational type deal with those guys. And all the first round picks off that defense from that year was just really something I don't think we've ever really, seen before. But Georgia's defense this year is still very good by college football standards, just giving up, around 15 points per game. They're near the top of the SEC in every important, defensive category that there is. So even though it may lack, people may not really recognize some of these names because a lot of these kids are really young players, just kind of finding their way. Defense is playing extremely well. I mean, you look at Trey Harris for Ole Miss. I think the week before against A&M had over 200 yards receiving. I think he had 2 catches for 12 yards in this one the other day, which is really just an incredible stat to be as successful. He'd really been all season long.
As a side note, Anthony, well, it was Trey Harris last week against Texas A&M that made some ridiculous catch, and then it
Yeah.
was shoot, I can't think. Jaden, can't think of his last name for Ole Miss. The other wide
Yeah,
receiver.
he had a great catch in this game, one of the craziest
Oh my
catches I've ever
word!
seen. That
Yeah,
was a one-handed falling off. I mean, that was one of the top 3 or 4 catches I think I've ever seen in my life.
like I didn't know that a human could bend his body backwards that much, catch the back end
Yeah,
of the football with one hand, and then get a foot down. It was one of the best catches
it
I've
was
ever seen.
amazing. It was amazing.
All right. We got Anthony Dasher here, UGAsports.com on Rivals. We're just about 3 weeks away from National Signing Day. Everything seemed to be in order. Any particular guys that you're keeping an eye on?
They, not as specifically. I mean, Georgia actually today, as we take this, got a flip from Florida. Nasir Johnson, a big defensive tackle that I know the Gators are, pretty upset about losing. The guy, 6'5", 310 pounds. So they've got another replacement now coming in for some of these defensive linemen who are going to be moving on, after this season. But yeah, I mean, Georgia probably got about 3 or 4 spots remaining, I think. So they're going to be able to afford to be very particular about who they bring in for these final few spots. But again, it's shaping up to be another great class, possibly the number 1 class in the country once again.
I got to think that while different people had opinions on who could possibly challenge this Georgia team this year, Tennessee would have been the team that most
Yeah,
people would have targeted at the
yeah.
beginning of the year. So this would have been the game of the year. It was in the SEC East last year, but just playing out the string at this point. Any concerns that you have about Tennessee on the road?
Sure. You got to, if you're Georgia, you got to, give Tennessee total respect. Granted, the East Division is wrapped up, but I can promise you there's nothing more the Vols would love to do than to in Georgia's 27-game win streak, get revenge from last year and set them off perhaps for a great season, next year. But I am curious to see what would happen though if Georgia does come in, start quickly in this one, based on what happened last week, at Missouri, where I think everybody was surprised that not so much that Missouri won that game, but the margin of victory. I think pretty much shocked a lot of people. Did me? I'm not again not surprised Missouri won, but wasn't expecting 38-6, 7 rather, whatever it was in that game. So if Georgia could get off to an early lead in that, maybe we'll see how they respond. But right now I think you've got to give Tennessee total respect. And heck, Georgia has a ton to play for, as we all know. I mean they, I don't you know, I don't think they can go into the SEC championship with with 1 loss, or even if they go undefeated and they lose 1 game. I think they're we're going to be out of the playoff picture. So they know what's on the line, and I think they'll respond pretty good knowing that.
And Vegas seems to think it's going to be a more competitive game than a lot of people do because 10 points, it's a
It's not a lot.
sizable
Yeah.
road favorite, but it's not anything crazy.
No, exactly. 10 points is not a lot in college football. And again, we've seen stranger things happen in this sport. We've seen teams, favored by a lot more, not be able to come out with wins. But again, a traditional rival like this, those fans will be jacked. Tennessee will be jacked, and I'm sure it's going to be a great game.
All right, Anthony. Appreciate you stopping by. Everybody,
Sure.
head out online to UGAsports.com. Check out Anthony's work at Rivals. Appreciate you being here. Enjoy the game.
Yes, sir.